Hey everyone, welcome back. This is part 2 in my discussion with David Gallimore on the topic of discipleship. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to Think on These, a podcast that is dedicated to helping you think serious thoughts so you will be led to serious joy. I'm your host, Alex Robinson, and let's get started. I've got a few more questions for David before I let him off here. So we've talked about just how difficult discipleship can be in a busy world and with those who are just natural consumers as Americans and how we need to push back against that and some things we need to be about to do that. So the next question I have is discipleship, because in some senses it's not as visible as we would like it. Of course, we want the goal of discipleship to be holiness and conform to the image of Christ. But how do we measure growth when it is invisible and also when it's slow and it's kind of harder to measure? How do we measure growth in discipleship?
It's not what I would see is so much a measurement as it goes back to what our commitment is. If we're committed to a long-term discipling relationship with someone, walking alongside them in life through all the good times, the bad times, being in the Word with them, praying with them, doing all those things that we should be doing in a discipling relationship. It just comes down to a matter of over time, how are you seeing Christ in that person's life? That's what it all comes down to, is as you said, the goal is to help them follow Christ and model their lives after Him. And it all comes down to, once again, we get stuck many times in that mentality of wanting results right away. But discipleship, it's not always that distinct in that way. That there's sometimes you will see short-term results from it, and praise God for those things. But sometimes it takes a longer relationship and a longer investment in someone to see those things. But I think eventually you will definitely see Christ in that person's life, or that's the expectation, and that's certainly the goal.
And just, I think, going into it knowing that it is a journey and it's long, it doesn't happen overnight. So,
Right.
Lowering your expectations as far as how fast it may happen, So just, I think, slow and steady wins the race. I go back to that. Just pouring in or receiving for the long haul is a much better approach than, and I mean, I'm used to seeing this in student ministry a lot, because, you only do have so long with students, but I think sometimes, especially in student ministry, people can have this kind of now or never mindset, which is, just not necessarily the case. And I often will phrase discipleship to students as what I want to help you become is a lifelong disciple that you just began as a student,
Yes.
We're called to be.
Yes. So. Yeah, it's in the end all about being faithful to what Christ has called us to, keeping the hand of the plow.
All right, well, just a few more questions here, mainly focusing on just the pastoral side. So just personally for you, what is kind of a hard or maybe the hardest part about discipleship as a pastor? What's a challenge for you in this area just as a pastor that pastors or those kind of in ministry might relate to?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest struggle that you have in the pastoral role is wanting that discipling relationship with everyone, in that sense, to see everyone reach that goal of maturity in Christ, in that, and certainly we play a broad role in that, but at the same time in those relationships to where there's more depth in there, where there's more personal, even one-on-one discipleship happening there. We know that's not the case that can just happen with every person, even though you'd like to just pour into everyone in that way personally. There's neither the time nor the your own resources to do that. So in that we have to be, as pastors, selective in how we spend our time, to where we hopefully using God's wisdom, can see where we can best to spend our time and efforts and energy into discipling relationships that's going to produce the most benefits out of that for the time that we have.
Yeah, you just go back to Jesus and his model where he had 12 and then 3 and then the 1, that's just something that we are limited. We wish we could be more to more.
Right.
But that's a good word. That is a challenge, but it doesn't take away from the pastor's heart to see. And it also really increases the mandate on individuals because pastors can't do it all. And I was going to cover this and I kind of skipped over it, but in Ephesians 4, we're told the role of pastors is to equip, not do it all. So pastors are to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. And so that's how they help this process, even with individuals.
Right. Yeah, that passage in Ephesians 4, that's always the go-to in that to understand the pastoral role, and that is just that it's equipping the saints for the work of the ministry. And going back to the preaching of the word, foundational for that. Then however much resources you can pour into individuals that are pretty confident are going to pour into others in that that you can spread a little bit of that in that way as well. But in that, just realizing that what a calling we have to pour into others in that way, and it's such a blessing to see someone that you have discipled to see them pouring into someone else then. And in that way, that's just such a blessing to see that. And that's just how God designed it to be. And that is just to be a blessing in our lives in that way, that it enriches our walk with Christ for that to happen. That kind of brings me to another point we also can look at is helping people to understand, and this might come in the way of more of immature believers, to understand that even they as immature believers have something to offer someone else. I think a lot of people are in that mindset, and maybe if they even have an understanding of discipling relationships, they think, well, that's something I can't do because I'm not equipped to do that. Hopefully somebody's pouring into them in such a way that that they'll come to the understanding that everyone has something to offer in that, in the call to make disciples, that we all are have that call.
That's right. Yeah. Jesus didn't say, when you are a mature disciple, you can do this.
Right.
Telling. He says, start right where you are. And that goes back to one of the very first questions I talked about was, you can't pour into others what you haven't received. So maybe the beginning of the Christian life, there's going to be maybe a little more taking in than giving out, but there's always got to be some giving out.
Yes.
That just increases, hopefully, as we grow. So a lot of people on this topic of discipleship, and this is kind of bringing us to the end here, David, they would say, or they would articulate it differently, but basically the gist of it is, I'm stuck in this area. I just feel stagnant and discouraged. Maybe it's based on factors that are in their own sphere, their own life, but maybe it's based on, I've even heard this articulated, I want to disciple other people, but I feel like there's not very many people around me who kind of want it. And so what kind of word would you give to somebody in those shoes?
I think Mark Dever had some very good advice that I heard him speak about before, and I think the question was framed to him: how do you choose someone to disciple, or who do you want to pour into? And as he put it, I was just like putting the feelers out there. You have a conversation with someone after a sermon, and you hear maybe they have some questions about it or something, might be a good time to, hey, let's plan some time this week to get together for lunch and discuss this more. It's just, once again, it's being relational as we're called to be, but also at the same time, we're once again searching out to people who are receptive to that just the extension there that we give of ourselves to disciple someone. We have to be searching, we have to be active in that. So once again, it goes back to the intentionality of, okay, who's going to be up for this, and I think God, in the Spirit working in people, I think it has a way of drawing people together like that. Sometimes it's just for, of course, seasons in that. There are probably some times in some people's lives that maybe, that they're, not ready to be discipled, in such a way, could it just be some different things going on in their lives at the time that has them distracted in different ways? Say, hey, but don't give up on them. Come back to them later. It's, there's always those opportunities as long as God's putting breath in our lungs, that we should be seeking and being intentional and seeking out those opportunities, to disciple. But at the same time, not spreading ourselves too thin in that. We can, do that. We can be a little over eager sometimes, but, we have to understand what our limitations are in life and just be willing to work in the confines of what God has given us and always be, using his wisdom in that.
Oh man, such good stuff there. And I would say one other thing just to add to that is if you go to someone and you get denied, if you will, they're just not ready or whatever it is. Sometimes I feel like that can almost discourage us so much that we just put our heads down in the sand and we just almost wait.
Right.
And I think we should just say, okay, then as you just mentioned, we trust the Lord. We trust his Spirit. Right now is just not a good time. We don't write that person off and say, well, they'll never have anybody. It just may not be the right time. You may not be the right person. There's all kinds of factors that go into that. But it doesn't mean that you can't there's not still someone that you can, or someones that you can start developing that kind of relationship with.
Yeah. So if we're looking for someone to disciple, it's probably not the wisest to walk up to someone and, how would you like to spend 5 years of meeting with me every Saturday morning and we're getting the word together? And, that's probably not the best way to start in that. But rather, once again, just kind of easing in and this, hey, let's have coffee sometime. Let's have lunch sometime and, just like to get in the word with you and pray with you and do all those things and just see how things go.
There you go. That's a lot less pressure, right? For both parties involved, that's where you kind of get the ghost off your back a little bit. You see it as relational, as you said.
Yes,
because you're somebody, I know the Lord, you know the Lord, I want to help you grow in the Lord, you're going to help me. That's what it's all about. And it doesn't have to be kind of this romanticized version of that or something that you hear about. And you do hear incredible stories of discipleship, but that doesn't, it can be that simple. Hey, let's get together this Saturday morning, or I'm going to do this. Would you want to come with me? And, with the whole intention of while they're with me, I want to show them, hey, this is how a Christian lives. This is how a Christian talks. This is how a Christian responds to difficulty. I heard one man say that he's an older man, and so a lot of young men come to him basically to be discipled, and he said he had an experience where he went to pay his light bill, or no, he went to the bank. That's what it was. He went to the bank, and I think the line was long or something, and he just had something real simple to do, and he just got kind of frustrated, and then the lady, the teller, whoever, said something to him that kind of upset him or whatever, and he said some sharp words back to her, and his disciplee, if you will, is standing there next to him. And so he said he gets in his truck and he just about halfway down the road just says, I've got to turn around and go back. And the guy's sitting with him was like, why's that? He said, I didn't treat that lady the way Christ would have me to treat her. And I didn't show you how a follower of Jesus should live. And so first off, I want to ask you to forgive me, but I'm going to go ask her to forgive me. And so he said he turned around and, he knew he was going to have to wait in that long line again. And so he gets in this long line and this lady's like, can I help you, sir? Again. And he's like, ma'am, I just want to apologize for how I spoke to you earlier. I'm a follower of the Lord, and he wouldn't have me to be that way. And so I just need to ask your forgiveness. And, he said it just shocked the lady that she was just like, oh, you came all the way back here just to do that? And said, of course, the other part of that was that made such an impact on the man who was with him, but also the man who he had with him helped hold him accountable. He said, would I have done that if I was by myself? I don't know, but I certainly was going to do that because this young brother who is with me, he, that made a difference. And so that's a story that sticks out to me in discipling, even in this is just ordinary. I'm going to deposit a check, and I've got to show you what it looks like when we sin to go make it right. So
there's so much dynamics in a discipling relationship like that, to where as time goes on, even when you get to know a person better, and you start to understand the sins they struggle with. They start to understand the sins that you struggle with, and what a blessing it is in life that we can be in a relationship like that with someone to where, we can confess things like that to one another without fear of all these things, that could come into play there. But to have a relationship where those things can be done, and that there's just there's just a special blessing to that, to have that type of dynamic in a relationship. And once again, it holds us to accountability. That's one of the benefits of a discipling relationship like that. We know how to pray for one another. And you come to this understanding then and say, hey, I'm not the only one that's struggling with this particular sin or whatever it may be, that, hey, this affects the other people as well. And we come to a better understanding of ourselves in light of that then.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just to kind of bring it all to a close here, first off, I'll just say David is somebody who models what we're talking about. I've watched David. I've known David for a long time. And I think that if I were to have somebody in my life who I wanted to say, you need to go watch this man live, David would be one of those people that I would say, watch how he treats people, how he interacts with people, watch his humility and his just fervent focus on the gospel, and emulate that. And if you'll do that, you'll be okay.
That's just glory to God for that.
But I really do appreciate you, brother, and thank you for coming on again. And
absolutely, it's my pleasure.
Absolutely. I plan to have you back, and we'll be talking about some other things on down the road. But just before we go, I always ask, I used to do a lightning round where I just ask quick questions, but just want to ask you I'm going to ask you two questions. First is, what is your best tip for quiet time? So if you were to just give somebody a tip to improve their quiet time with the Lord, so I'm talking about just spending time with the Lord. And then secondly, give us a resource that has shaped you in this area of discipleship.
Quiet time, get rid of distractions. That's one of the biggest things right there. Whatever may distract you, because some people are early people, some people are late people. As far as the time of the day, whatever. But important thing is just to get along with God and just cut things that's going to get your mind off in other places. And goodness knows we have enough of those distractions in our lives. But just clear away the distractions, get along with God, and talk to Him. What was the second question?
Second question is a resource that has shaped you in this area of discipleship.
Mark Dever's book, Discipleship. Very small book. You can read it in a small amount of time, but very, very good book on discipleship. That would come highly recommended. Trellis and the Vine, another good book on discipleship and just a Christian community together. That would be a couple of top ones.
I actually had that here on my notes as to talk about. So you hit the nail on the head. Yeah, well, brother, again, thank you. And thank you to all of you again for tuning in to another episode of Think on These. And thank you to David for joining me today. And we will see you next time on Think on These.